Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Inside ODOT podcast hosted by ODOT Communications. I'm Sarah Kelber, Internal Communications Coordinator, and your host for today's episode. In this episode, you'll hear a segment from our ODOT Origin series, learn about culturally modified trees and how we work with them, an interview with Tara Widener about the new emissions website, as well as some upcoming events of interest. Welcome, and let's get started. Starting as an intern in the early 1990s, Chi Mai has been an integral part of the ODOT engineering family. Check out her origin story.
My name is Chi Mai, and I'm a transportation system analysis engineer. While I was in high school, I had no idea what I was going to do for a career. There was an ad for a high school engineering intern at ODOT, so I applied, and then I started with ODOT in June of 1992. Engineers and planners would take me to meetings with them and assign me small tasks, and I had such a positive experience that I wanted to become an engineer. And so as soon as I finished school, I started with ODOT as a traffic analyst. I was in that position 8 years. It was a promotion into the senior traffic engineer position. And then there was an opportunity in Salem as the transportation system analysis engineer. We connect the data and the tools and inform or give guidance. It's very exciting and very gratifying as well. What keeps me at ODOT is the people that I work with, technically strong and passionate about their work and the spirit of stewardship. It's very noble. It's just an environment that I want to be a part of.
Culturally modified trees are trees that have been deliberately altered by humans. Indigenous people use these for many purposes. Examples include peeling pine trees for their edible inner bark and to collect their pitch. Some are peeled for materials to make basketry, clothing, and other important items. Some have their trunks and branches trained or altered to mark an important location or provide direction. During the removal of hazardous trees and debris after the 2020 wildfires, archaeologists and tribal monitors made note of many of these trees. Unfortunately, several of them had to be removed. To help mitigate these impacts, a new video and related training materials were developed with the assistance of Oregon tribes and federal and state agencies. Listen in to learn more.
In September 2020, devastating wildfires burned nearly 1 million acres across Oregon. During the removal of hazardous trees and debris following the fire, archaeologists and tribal monitors recorded many archaeological sites, including culturally modified trees, or CMTs. CMTs are unique because though they may have been created in the distant past, they're living, growing cultural resources that are still being created today. Increasing awareness about these trees is important as we face more frequent fires and increased development.
In the Cascade Range, where the trees are fairly old, they're like over 500 years old. You know, there's been different time frames of when they were peeled. So we have some ancestral ones that are fairly old. Today we continue to peel the cedars for the bark for different cultural purposes. When we come out and peel the tree, that tree to us is sacrificing itself for what we're taking from it. So we're always kind of give thanks to the trees and stuff when we're gathering. And so we're very respectful to the trees, and the reason that we only take a piece off is to make sure the tree lives and survives. And so we want to see these trees become very old. So I think that's just part of the respecting the tree and caring for the tree. And then later, as it gets older, some of the trees were traditionally used like for the plank boards, for the plank houses, and big old trees for the making of the canoes and things like that.
There is something I think that's universal in seeing a tree that's tied to your culture as a marker on the landscape. And in some ways, I think like seeing it recognized, it legitimizes your experience. It legitimizes your story beyond just what you've been told by your elders or your ancestors or your grandparents. Just overall, it helps broaden our understanding of the history of this place. So we all have special places in our own mental maps, and those often are tied to stories or experiences or really important events to us. To me, a place is a space that has that deep significance, and that can be just very individual, or it could be much, much bigger.
Coming up to huckleberries is just part of the yearly round. Like, you get to August, September, and it's time to go up and get huckleberries, and it's setting those kind of cycles, and that's just still how we continue our way of life. It's really important to keep them because as tribal members, being able to go there and see these peeled cedars, it's that connection to our ancestors in this land.
We maintain a database in the same way that the State Historic Preservation Office maintains a database of all of our culturally significant places. And that includes not just archaeological sites and historic properties, but also gathering places, traditional cultural properties. When our forestry department or our tribal members tell us that they've encountered a culturally modified tree or they know of a gathering place, we document that as a culturally significant place in our traditional cultural landscapes database. Many of the resources that the tribes used here locally were these more soft resources. They're not the stones and things that everybody looks around as archaeological resources. They see arrowheads or flakes and bowls on the ground. Most of the tools and technologies that were used here locally were sedge, were hazel, were willow, were cedar, and so they don't preserve in the archaeological records. So maintaining a record of these resources today shows the history and connection with people to the landscape, and a landscape that has changed dramatically over the last 170 years. And so we need to maintain a record of that and an acknowledgement of that connection to place and to landscape.
CMTs do not stand alone in the forest, but are part of a larger ecosystem that ties us to our past and remains integral to many cultures today.
The ODOT Climate Office has a new website that tracks the collective state agency work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. It's a wide-ranging website that drills down into specific details about how we're going to reach our emission reduction goals. To help make sense of it all, Matt Noble sat down with a member of the Climate Office to explain the site and give an overview of what we're doing to reduce emissions from transportation.
Hello everyone, my name is Matt Noble. Greenhouse gas emissions from transportation make up about 35% of total greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon. Those emissions are contributing to climate change. So, for several years, ODOT and other state agency partners have been working on ways to reduce emissions from transportation. In March 2023, ODOT launched a new website, OregonTransportationEmissions.com, to help explain to the public what we're doing to reduce those transportation emissions. The website also tracks our progress, and the outlook is actually pretty good. We're on track to reduce emissions by 60% below 1990 levels by 2050. And that's pretty close to our long-term goal of an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. However, as you can probably tell, the website can be a little hard to wrap your head around at first, so to help explain the website and to provide more information about what we're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, I'm here on Teams today with ODOT's Climate Impact Program Lead, Tara Widener. Tara, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Matt. Great to be here. Super excited to talk about launching the website.
Yeah, thank you. And just so our listeners are aware, how would you describe your involvement with the website? Like one of the authors, or how would you describe that?
Yes, blood, sweat, and tear author.
So, with that illustrious intro, let's get into describing what the site is about. But before I want to get into the actual website itself, I want to paint a picture for our listeners. And so could you please give a little more background, Tara, about what greenhouse gas emissions from transportation are? Like, where do they come from? Why do they matter? And why are we working with other agencies to reduce them?
Good place to start. So the accumulation of greenhouse gas, which is largely carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere, that's changing the Earth's climate. We're already seeing a lot of the effects of high levels of carbon leading to damaging weather events, landslides on the coast, erosion. Wildfires, floods, heat domes, you name it. These are the things that are happening. All sectors emit carbon into the atmosphere, but transportation is the largest. We're like over 1/3 of the statewide greenhouse gas emissions, and that's really holding steady over time, where sort of electricity is coming down. Transportation is a pretty solid third for the last decade or so. And then, so where does this come from within the transportation sector? Most of it's vehicles on the road. So we got our light duty passenger vehicles, and then we got more heavy duty vehicles, and they're really emitting almost 3 times as much as a passenger car, a heavy truck. So we got to really watch those. They do a lot of good things for us, but they have their outsized impacts. And then about 20% of the greenhouse gas in the transportation sector comes from things that aren't even on the road, and aircraft being a huge part of that, but also marine and railroad vehicles that are moving. So if we can reduce transportation, that's going to slow down those impacts to our environment and really help us out and provide a more sustainable future for Oregonians. And as a side benefit, we're going to get a whole bunch of other things that are helpful. So cleaner air, more affordable and healthier ways to get around, not hooked to gas prices that are volatile, instead getting energy from our local dams and things that stay within the economy. So all sorts of reasons for wanting to tackle this issue.
Awesome. Thank you for going over that. I think that lays a good foundation for the rest of our discussion. So moving on to the actual website, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what it says, I'd like to cover its purpose first because it brings together several actions from several different agencies. So could you please talk about what problem the emission sites sets out to solve?
Yeah, I think you've got it right there. I mean, there's all kinds of actions going on that multiple agencies are doing, because it's not all the DOT, but people think of it as the DOT. But there's a lot of things going on, and that really makes it difficult for the public to make sense of it. They don't see it as a big picture. We have a roadmap, but it's not out there in a way that people can access. So the site brings everything together in what I hope is an easy to understand format, and tracks our progress in several areas so people can see how we're doing, what we're doing, and what we're not doing on that roadmap. And then, we're trying to track that. So what progress are we making, or where are we falling behind? So it's really important to both share the roadmap and then talk about the progress.
And who are the agencies with whom we at ODOT are collaborating on the website?
The website, it was a 2-year collaboration of subject matter experts across 4 state agencies. That includes ourselves at the DOT, the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, Department of Energy, DOE, and the Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD. Those were the 4 core folks that we worked together consistently to try to move forward this roadmap. And then we also went and reviewed all the text that we wrote at least once, maybe more times, with about 30 reviewers. But the key authorship really came down to a few of us in the climate office and the comms group, yourself included, and our web designer.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. So let's get into more, as I keep saying, nuts and bolts. So could you please summarize goals, objectives, kind of what does it say?
We have one goal, and that is from 1990 to 2050, the transportation sector needs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80%, same as all the other sectors. Second, we have 2 objectives. So that's the 2 part. Of that one goal, it rolls out into 2 things we have to do. We have to clean up each vehicle mile, and we need to reduce the number of vehicle miles. So those are our 2 objectives. And then that is all undergirded by 6 categories of actions. So that's the process. 1 goal, 2 objectives to get there, and 6 categories. And I can count out the categories. So we start off with the first 2, our vehicle and fuel technology. Got to clean those up. System operations, this third, and that's really manage our growth in roads and drive more fuel efficient. Then we get to the rest, which are the VMT reduction side. So land use, we know if we put destinations and homes closer together, we can have shorter trips. And that leads to 5, which means you can start walking and biking and micro-mobility, the transportation options. And then lastly, to put it all together, we need pricing policies. And those are incentives for non-driving to get around, incentives so that you'll move to those, and also funding for the programs themselves. So that's the 1-2-6 strategy. And I should say the website comes from the STS, the Statewide Transportation Strategy. So about 10 years ago, we had a 2-year stakeholder process. That means we got together people from agencies and communities all across the state. And they arrived at a place of what would it take to get there. And so this roadmap, this STS, is the handshake on how hard to push on each of these 6 categories. How much can we tolerate in pricing our roads? There's some equity issues there. How much do we think the technology can take on? And we won't, we could just get people to buy different vehicles. And then how much do we have to reduce everybody's VMT to get there? So it was this handshake of balance of all those. And the key thing that came out is there's no silver bullet. We need to make progress on all of these objectives in all 6 categories. So it's not one solution. In addition to explaining that roadmap, we have a couple ways to track our progress on that roadmap. First, we wanted to have a high-level assessment, and we call these our report cards. And we've really graded in those categories. There's like 30 actions, 6 categories, 30 actions. And we are saying, hey, are we making progress? Are we meeting the goals, or are we falling behind? And we track that for a couple years from now in 2025 and then out in 2050, comparing our progress relative to what this vision or roadmap says we should be at in those years. And that progress can reflect a new funding source or some outside changes like the big shift to remote work, or obstacles like people are buying a lot more SUVs these days. They're a lot bigger and less fuel efficient. So that's our first high-level grade report cards. The other set of progress that we want to share is a more quantitative, and we call these our progress charts. And so this allows people to dive a little deeper and look at the trajectory over time of where we think we'll be on several of the actions. And so far, we have mostly actions tied to the vehicles and fuels categories. But through this, I think we're trying to get people to understand the many facets of our roadmap and the plan, be informed about all the pieces, and help us really to get there.
Okay, so we have our one goal guiding everything. And then within that, there are those 2 objectives: clean up each vehicle mile and then reduce how far and how often people drive. Is that a good way to explain those 2?
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Okay, and then underpinning those 2 objectives are the 6 categories. And then within those categories, there's specific actions. And then those actions are what we're tracking and reporting on. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually a lot of the comments we've gotten back about this are that, oh, I just saw this part of the goal and I didn't see how this other part connected to it. So it really is kind of already doing that of helping people to see the whole picture. It's a prism, and which side are you looking at? You'd like to actually step back and see the whole prism.
Yeah, definitely. I like that way of describing it as a prism. Well, actually, I do want to circle back to those 2 objectives. So cleaning up each vehicle mile driven. So that means essentially reducing the emissions from those vehicles, correct? Is that a good way?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other one, reducing how often and how far people drive. So are those objectives created equal? Because I know we're also tracking progress of those objectives. Is one farther along than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. And 5 years ago, I would have told you a different story. We were struggling on both sides, but happy to report here that we really made a lot of progress on cleaning up each vehicle mile. We don't quite see it on our roadways yet because people are buying those electric vehicles, but thanks to recent rulemakings at Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, we've gone a long way. And some of those things are like the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations, if you've heard about those. And this is going to mandate no longer being able to sell combustion vehicles in the state after 2035. We actually have done quite a bit. If you'll see the site, we're probably twice as close as we were 5 years ago. On the first objective, I just want to say it's up to people now to really make the choice. I think we've done some systemic change, and it's really important for them to start taking advantage of the new vehicles that are out there and feel that value of wanting to clean up the environment and wanting to improve and all the co-benefits that come up with that. The second goal, reducing VMT, has a lot of opportunities for improvement. We have some chess moves that have been played in the background in terms of how we're going to review and put some gates on both the list of projects that come forward and that are funded So I don't know if you've heard of the climate friendly and equitable communities. So that's a long range planning thing. We've also have some adjustments to the STIP funding. That's our 3-year funding at the agency that actually funds a lot of local things as well. So we're starting to put some climate lenses on these things and think about them differently. And so some of those chess moves are in place to do that.
So it seems like the second objective, the reducing vehicle miles traveled, which is also to say how often and how far people drive. So if that's the sticky wicket, what is an example? I mean, you mentioned the climate friendly and equitable communities. Is that one of the ways we can start making a dent in that harder to achieve objective?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think where we would end up with that is a couple areas I would highlight for reducing VMT. And this is where I really like the PRISM idea, because these two things work together. I kind of talk about them as carrots and sticks.
Hmm.
So in the carrot side, what I mean there is a program that we've developed in the last couple years at ODOT called the Great Streets Program. And that's where you'll take like a city in an urban area, maybe there's a school nearby, maybe a lot of businesses, but it's just not fun to walk down. There might be a crossing really far distances that might not be, it doesn't seem safe. Maybe it's not lit well. So the Great Streets programs can come in and really make that streetscape something that you would like to walk down. And maybe you start to see the cafes come out and so forth. So make it a place that people are pulled to do the modes that we want them to do. So that's the carrot part. And then on the other side, there's the stick. So why would you do that if it's raining today? If you've got to take your daughter and so forth. So starting to think about these things, how do we nudge you into doing these other things? So that's something like pricing. So when I think of pricing, there's other reasons to do pricing. One reason is, hey, we're not funding the cost of our transportation system very well, and inflation is not helping that. So we really need to start paying the true cost of traveling. So if we do that, then the price to actually drive will go up because fossil fuels, cost of gas and so forth was increased. So if we start to recover those costs, you'll pay a little bit more and be a little bit less incentive for you to drive and maybe push you more into walking and biking in the other modes. We're also doing some congestion tolls in the Portland area. And then there's other efforts in the program you just talked about, the climate friendly and equitable communities, that's pushing to say limit parking and maybe some parking fees. So I think those two things work together to really help us tackle reducing the amount of miles that we have to travel in vehicles.
I like that analogy, carrots and sticks. I think it works well. And just kind of a fun final question for you, Tara. Thinking through all of the different actions and all the different programs that are on the website and all the things that we are either doing or that we say we're going to do through 2050, do you have a favorite? Like, do you have a program that in your head you're like, oh, wow, when this is either further along or when this thing is complete, it's going to be so cool and I can't wait to see it? Do you have any favorite or favorites that you're looking forward to coming to fruition?
Well, I live in Portland. I love to get around on a day where I can take a scooter into the office, go for lunch, and then take like a bike share back or transit. I love that multimodal lifestyle. I think if people try this out, it's great. I'm really looking forward to those multimodal networks being available to us. The other thing I would say though is that's great. And I know there's some people that have like pent up demand that they don't have a good way to get to, their local shop or whatever, and they will start doing that. But I think it's so important to put those sticks in as well, right? I think we have to have pricing programs not only to cover the cost of our roads so we can build these things, but to motivate people to do what actually is fun. And you just need that nudge sometimes to do something, and you're like, why didn't I bike to work once a week before? This is great, I love it. So I guess to me, I think you need that nudge to really sink in and appreciate the really good part, which is the carrot side, the great vital spaces that we'll be creating.
I like that. Enjoy the carrot side. I like that. Okay, well, that is the end of my prepared questions, Tara. So before we close out the interview, is there anything else you'd like to tell people about the website that we didn't cover?
No, I hope they go and visit it. Start with the about page that explains the strategy we talked about and
Mhm.
why we're doing this and why climate matters. You can jump also to the progress page. That's the sort of cheater way to get to, how are we doing with the charts and the report cards. But, pick your favorite area and dig in and learn about it and see how it's connected to the others.
Definitely, yeah. I would also encourage people to check it out. And again, that URL is OregonTransportationEmissions.com. Tara, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about the website today. Always lovely to see you and chat with you about this kind of stuff. So just appreciate you helping me explain this to the agency today.
Excellent, thanks. And you're a key part to making it happen. So thank you.
There's always something going on here at ODOT. Here are some of our upcoming events. First up, save the date for Fall Forum. This year's event will be all remote, taking place on Wednesday, October 4th. Hear from the leadership team and a keynote speaker, and attend afternoon breakout sessions on a variety of topics. Registration will open soon. Keep an eye on your Inside ODOT email newsletter edition for more. Also, save the date for 8 a.m. Wednesday, August 30th for a town hall about the next iteration of the Strategic Action Plan and its connection to the Oregon Transportation Plan. We'll have more details in Inside ODOT soon. You have been listening to the Oregon Department of Transportation's Inside ODOT podcast. If you'd like to learn more about these topics, you can find links on our show notes page. If you have story suggestions or any feedback for us, hit us up at the Inside ODOT mailbox. Until then, I'm Sarah Kelber. Safe travels, everyone.